The National Center for Campus Public Safety reached out to MicroAssist for a little bit of help in creating a course that would help campus public safety officers develop skills for verbal de-escalation. What's verbal de-escalation? Well, there are occasions when situations may escalate to physical violence, when conflict may advance from just a harsh exchange of words to actual physical harm. The idea behind verbal de-escalation is to use tools and techniques that help somebody to enter a situation and to calm people down, to provide space for accommodation and prevent it from escalating into violence. And the National Center for Campus Public Safety wanted to be able to convey this training with all the benefits that online training offers, with it being you could take it anytime you wanted, you could take it wherever you had an internet connection and a computer, and you could develop a lot of the skills in the same way. Now, the National Center had a couple of criteria that they wanted to meet. One is they said it has to be interactive. It can't just be information being passed along to people. And they wanted to make sure that it would follow Section 508 requirements so that it'd be available to people with disabilities, so that it would, in fact, be available to all learners. MicroAssist was able to work together with the National Center to create a series of modules, a 5-module course that took approximately an hour, maybe an hour and a half to complete, that was interactive and met Section 508 requirements. The first 4 modules covered basic information about what verbal de-escalation was and introduced the learners to tools and techniques that they could use in the workplace. The 5th module took the skills developed and the knowledge developed in the first 4 modules and allowed people to practice these skills in multi-path scenario. You were presented with a situation and you had to make a choice, and some of those choices led to good outcomes and some of those choices led to poor outcomes. So it's Module 5, Practicing De-escalation, that we would like to spend a little bit of time talking about today. Let's look at a scenario where we're asked to build a rapport with the speaker.
You've just entered an office. A student is yelling at the professor, upset at being accused of plagiarism. Your goal is to build rapport with the student so that the student will trust you to help find a resolution. Without rapport and trust, while the conflict may be temporarily interrupted, it is likely to remain unresolved and may begin again in the future. There are 10 paths through the scenario. 5 lead to successfully building rapport. While each decision leads to the next, there is no back button. You can attempt the scenario as many times as you wish. Note that the scenario does not have audio. Please click Begin.
And the goal here, as you heard described, is to build rapport with the speaker. So we can click the Begin and we can begin our participation. So when you enter into this scenario, you're faced with a situation. There's a student yelling, "What do you mean I plagiarized? This is my own work." And there's a faculty member standing behind their desk looking worried. You're asked, what is your first action? Select an answer, then click Submit. Now in the upper right, you'll see that there's an area for feedback for choices. And a little bit below that, there's a note that says you just entered an office. A student is yelling at the professor, upset at being accused of plagiarism. So these two features help the learner always remember what the goal of this scenario is, where you need to get, what's going on, build rapport with the speaker, and also to provide feedback for your choices. Now down at the bottom, you'll see an I button that says, do I know anything else? And if we click on that I button, for more information, you see that the student seems to be male, in their late teens. The student's face is flushed and they seem stressed, as evidenced by the student's loud voice and pacing around the office. So this draws on certain behaviors and characteristics that are described in Module 2. We draw from Module 3 with information that their behavior can be described as disruptive using the behavioral descriptions from Module 3. And in fact, if we want to refresh our memory on what that looks like, we can go to the behavior description, diagram, and resources. So let's go ahead and close that box now that we know that additional information. We're asked, what is your first action? Select an answer, then click Submit. You can choose, say, I need you to calm down so that we can discuss this reasonably. You can ask, what's going on? You can ask, the paper is your own work, and then you could submit. In terms of accessibility, there's a few things to point out. Color meets color contrast ratios. Also note that you can tab through all of these actions. This is a multiple choice question. Another thing is that if somebody's using a screen reader, this will behave as a multiple choice question is expected to behave. So let's sort of say, hey, I need you to calm down so that we can discuss this reasonably. That sounds like it's a firm, authoritative response. Surely that'll resonate with a college student. So let's click on that and then click Submit. And we find that it turns out that's not the best response. So the student issues a string of expletives and stalks out of the room. The confrontation is ended and you've not built rapport with the student. The conflict, while stopped, remains unresolved. If we look up in the upper right hand corner, we see our feedback and we say that issuing a directive with or without building rapport may lead a speaker to think you do not respect their right to have their own values. Right? So now we know, oh, that was the wrong choice. Well, let's try again. So let's click on try again. So now one of the neat things is that you can see what you chose last time. So you can see that say I need you to calm down so that we can discuss this reasonably has a mark by it. So that tells you this choice has been selected. So let's choose something different. We might ask what's going on. Let's see what happens if we do that. So we'll click it and then submit. And we say you chose to ask what's going on. The student responds, this professor just accused me of plagiarizing my paper. I worked on this for days. This is my own work. And if we look in the feedback section in the upper right-hand corner, we see that what's going on is an open-ended question. And it's a great way to show that you're interested in what the speaker is saying and to start building rapport. We'll notice that the student says, this is my own work. And in response, you can either ask, did you plagiarize the paper? Or you can say, you're telling me you put in several days of work and the professor is accusing you of plagiarizing. How am I doing? Well, asking if they plagiarized the paper might lead to antagonism. So let's click on say. You're telling me you put in several days of work and let's submit. So we can ask, does the professor have proof? Or you can point to the chairs in the hall and say, let's sit down so you can tell me more about it. Let's go with that second option. Point to the chairs in the hall and say, let's sit down so you can tell me more about it. And we click submit. And we find out that choosing this option results in the student looking at you uncertainly. Then he shrugs and says, okay. And then we get the feedback. This is excellent work. Congratulations, you successfully built rapport with the student. It's challenging to design an online course to teach skills such as verbal de-escalation, which rely on the exchange of information and training, but by using elements such as multiple choice questions, by providing feedback, by providing information, by anticipating what the learner will attempt to do, by anticipating the knowledge that the learner needs to have, and making sure that those elements are part of the online course, National Center and MicroAssist together were able to build a course that achieved all of National Center's objectives and did so in a way that makes it accessible to all learners.